today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the United States and Canada's relations with each other, kind of the relationship between these two countries that we sometimes overlook and don't give it a good enough picture. Now, the main thing that we want to look at with this relationship is NAFTA. NAFTA stands for the North American Free Trade Agreement. Because it's a North American free trade agreement, it includes Mexico as well. It's Canada, the United States, and Mexico, all this North American free trade agreement. And then the United States and Canada are known as the world's leading trading partners. This relationship between these two countries is the best in any relationship between countries in the world, judging by trade and those sorts of things, because they trade with each other more than they do any other single nation. Now, in 1989, the United States and Canada lifted trade restrictions with each other, so this relationship started to develop in 1989. And then in 1994, they developed the North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This trade agreement that allowed free trade within all of them. In other words, they didn't put tariffs on each other's goods. You could sell to companies within and people within all three countries without any tariffs, with the same price that you put on it within your own country, to kind of build North America and to keep like European and Asian products, to keep those prices a little higher so people would be more willing to buy things in North America so that the economies of North America would be that much better. Now, one thing that started to develop because of this was outsourcing. What a lot of companies in the United States did is they created factories in like Mexico, south of the border, because labor was a lot cheaper in Mexico and they could get the product created cheaper and then bring it to the United States and sell it for a whole lot more. So you have that problem that develops within NAFTA because of this free trade agreement. But one thing I do want to point out is that NAFTA is different from the European Union, which we'll talk about in the Europe unit. It's different from the European Union because there are no free movement of peoples within the North America. In other words, in the European Union, a person can move from country to country and work and be legal. You cannot do that in the United States. You have to go through and get the proper paperwork and the proper visas. But in the European Union, that is not so. So that's the difference between NAFTA and the European Union. Now, the next thing in dealings with relations is NATO. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this includes the United States and Canada, as well as other Atlantic nations like in Europe, those areas. It's an alliance between these nations, a military alliance as well as a trade alliance, I guess you could say, that connects these countries that they watch the rest of the world. It's a peacekeeping alliance. It's an effort to keep peace along the North Atlantic countries, and it's kind of a system that shows the relationship between the United States and Canada as well as the United States and Canada with the rest of the world. The next relationship that exists is NORAD. NORAD stands for the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Okay, that's what NORAD stands for. It monitors the airspace in North America, and this really developed after 9/11, after the Twin Towers were struck by commercial jets. And this system monitors that airspace to keep these places safe within North America. The next relationship aspect that we want to look at in regards to the United States and Canada is the border security. The border security is very important in regards to the United States and Canada, and it really started coming to play when Ahmed Rassam, whenever he crossed the border in plans of bombing the airport in Los Angeles in 1999. Of course, he was caught at the border, and this was not successful, but it created concerns between the United States and Canada, and especially with the United States, about border security in the north, because this allowed people being able to come in. The idea was that they could fly into Canada easily and then cross the border by truck or car and get into the United States a lot easier and do terrorist-type activities. Problem with this is 80% of trade and 80% of transportation is with semi-trucks, meaning 80% of those exports that we were talking about and imports between these two nations is by truck. So stopping this or creating these roadblocks to check everything could create a problem because it would slow down the movement of goods, which could essentially hurt the economy. So this 80% of transportation is important to look at in regards to border security, and it's something that they are looking at. Now you probably see this slide and think, man, we didn't have anything on those other slides, and now he writes a dang novel on here. Sorry about that, but I wanted to give you a picture of all of the agreements here in regards to environmental issues. The environmental issues between the United States and Canada is very important. Some of the concerns with environmental issues is that the border is 5,500 miles, a stretch of 5,500 miles. So essentially you're looking at this 5,500 mile stretch and you're trying to create border security, as well as you're trying to limit the amount of interaction that humans are having with the environment. And there's 5 different things that I want to look at here that the United States and Canada has come together and created. The first is the Boundary Waters Treaty, and this was in 1909. Kind of the idea of protecting the Great Lakes and some of those waterways that go between the United States and Canada. Then you had the Great Lakes Water Agreement, again protecting those Great Lakes. This agreement took place in 1978. Pollution is huge on the Great Lakes because you have factories that are using this water to maybe cool their equipment off, as well as a lot of times they were dumping their factory runoff into the Great Lakes. And if a corporation was doing that in Canada, it would essentially affect the side of the United States that borders the Great Lakes area as well. So this came in and was trying to protect that. And it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of sad. There was an interview where one of these company men, these corporation owners in the United States, was being interviewed, and the interviewer was saying, man, you're destroying this environment by pumping in your chemicals from your factory. And the owner of this company in the United States said, we're not doing anything to the Great Lakes. It's naturally running itself out. And literally while the interview was going on, these ducks flew in and landed on the water in the background and then keeled over dead. Okay, so kind of showing you that you are in fact harming the Great Lakes. And in 1978, they started doing something about it. The next, we have the Pacific Salmon Treaty. This treaty between the United States and Canada and the Pacific Ocean about salmon fishing. This was in 1985, trying to protect the salmon. And then you have the Kyoto Protocol, which we'll go over the Kyoto Protocol when we get to the East Asia unit, because it's kind of you'll notice by the language here, it's kind of a trade agreement between these Asian nations of protecting the environment. And in 2011, Canada backs out of the Kyoto Protocol, not because they don't agree with it, but because they know that a lot of nations are not following through with this protocol. And then the more recent, is the Joint Border Air Quality Strategy. This was formed in 2003. This was a committee that was formed to help protect the air in between the United States and Canada, help to protect air pollution, because again, with air pollution, just because the pollution is being released in the United States does not mean it's just going to fall right back down on the United States as acid rain. Most of the time what happens is it gets into the environment and it moves. So these companies and corporations in other nations like Canada can have this air pollution, and then the acid rain and smog and haze could be affecting the United States, even though that pollution might not be going on in the United States. And then on the last slide, I'm just going to run through this really quickly. It's a list of all the things that they share, the characteristics shared between the United States and Canada. And I actually created a new topic just because it didn't go with the relationship. It's just shared characteristics between the United States and Canada. They share the same history. You've got the French and Indian War that brought in Canada, the American Revolution, which the United States kicked Great Britain out, but they stayed in Canada. So you have a lot of the same history. You also share a lot of the same resources, the same minerals. Petroleum is found in Canada as well as in the United States. Coal, iron ore, hydroelectric power especially. You could find that in both places. Both of these places have environmental concerns. They're worried about the environment. They're doing things to protect the environment. And a lot of times in these units, you're not going to see that. The nations aren't going to worry so much about it. They also share geography. They're two of the more larger nations in the world, and they're connected next to each other. So they share that geographic area. Fifth, you've got religions. Most of these are predominantly religious countries, Christian countries, and then you've got different denominations and different branches of Christianity, but they're predominantly Christian. You also have shared languages. English is predominantly spoken in the United States and is also predominantly spoken in Canada, but also in the United States you've got other languages that are spoken common as well. Spanish language And then in Canada, a lot of the area speaks French. So you do have some shared language, but you also don't have some shared languages. Also migration, the movement of people. There's been a lot of migration. There's been a lot of immigration into both of these nations because they're some of the more industrial nations in the world, and because now you have a lot of the tertiary and quaternary type jobs that people in Latin America and Asia are seeking out and wanting, because now those nations are kind of in your secondary economic activities to where you have a lot of factories, but then you want those higher up jobs. You can't excel because of the outsourcing that's going on. Those jobs are in the United States and Canada. Now the next is the government types. Both of these countries have similar government types. The United States, of course, has a democratic republic depending on what branch you're looking at the national or the local branch. And then Canada has a similar type of republican system because of their parliamentary system. Now they also are a dominion. They're kind of connected to Great Britain still, and so they have a lot of elements that are similar to Great Britain, but still those are very similar types of government systems. And then number 9, your economic similarities. The economic types of both of these are on the right. Canada a little bit closer to socialism than the United States, but still they have a free market type of economy to where they allow supply and demand to run things, and the people and consumers are deciding the economic decisions. And because of that, you have the tertiary and quaternary type jobs. You have success in the economy. And last but not least, they're both just awesome. They both got bacon. Bacon's awesome. Who doesn't like bacon, right? Except Canada has Canadian bacon, which isn't real bacon. It's like ham, but it's still bacon, so it's still pretty awesome.